Hello and welcome to the channel. I am the HeirofCarthage, and today we're going to be covering some more Warhammer 3 news. Now, there is a deluge of content coming out right now, mostly at the moment from other content creators like myself, because Creative Assembly gave us access to some video footage from the game. It is a little too early for us to have a pre-release copy of the game, but they wanted us to get some content, and so they recorded some footage and provided it to us, and honestly, there's quite a lot to be gleaned from it. You may have even noticed that I don't cover a ton of the Warhammer 3 news in great detail, and it's because, honestly, a lot of times the stuff they're putting out, even though there's a little meat to it, is mostly just milk, meaning it's mostly just fluff to keep you hyped up before the game comes out. Now, if you enjoy that type of thing, it's fine. Now, personally, I just don't think a lot of it's worth covering. However, now I feel like we have a lot of things worth covering because we have some more substance to cover. Now, if you haven't seen this Grand Cathay trailer that's playing in the background, I'll have that linked. But anyway, I was just using this as an intro because today we're going to swap over to some video footage I have showing many, not all, of the units on the Cathay roster. But not just that. We're going to get to see their stats and abilities and get to assess a little bit of what gameplay is going to be like for Grand Cathay and Warhammer 3. So let's not waste any more time and let's dive right in. Now, right off the bat, we're going to be looking at Jade Warriors. We did not get a look at Peasant Long Spearmen, so we won't have that at the moment. The Jade Warriors have some interesting stuff here. Formation attack, which I'll talk about in a moment. They can hide in a forest. But more interestingly is this special ability, Defensive Stance. Basically, what this ability is going to do is when this unit stands still for long enough, it's going to become more charge resistant. And in the second phase, which is after, again, the right number of seconds, it's after 10 seconds, I guess, they're going to also gain armor. So the idea with this is that it's going to make you want to have these troops standing still, defending the rest of your Cathay troops so that you can brace against charges. So this doesn't apparently mean that you have to play passive, but it appears that there will be some encouragement for Grand Cathay to play somewhat defensively around its missiles, and we'll see that further when we look at the next unit ability. Now, as we learned in the unit roster blog, all units in the Cathay roster are going to have some type of battle harmony, whether it is yin or yang. These melee units tend to have yang, which basically means when they're in the presence of a yin unit, typically a missile unit, they're going to gain leadership and melee defense, and that can go up to a certain level, but also has a base level. So again, it's going to make them stronger when they're in the presence of the troops they should be protecting. Now, last couple of thoughts on Jade Warriors. We can see their stats here. They've got pretty solid armor. Remember that this is a step above the Peasant Long Spears, but also a different type of unit because this is a sword-based unit. They have pretty solid leadership. They're going to be slow-moving. They've got pretty low attack, pretty solid defense, and it's going to be even higher if you're in the presence of yin units. And their weapon strength is pretty low with a low charge bonus. So this is definitely a defensive unit. They've got a shield. They have high armor. They have pretty solid defense stats, which are going to be buffed further. It also has this formation attack, which when this tooltip pops up, you'll see it says the unit will try to stay in formation when in melee. I don't know exactly what this means yet. Formation attack was present in some past games like Rome 2, and it was pretty crappy. So we'll see what this means, but ultimately this is a defensive sword unit. Now the next unit up is going to be a different flavor of Jade Warriors. This one is going to be the Halberd armed unit, and it's going to be very similar to the sword armed unit. Except as we get to the stats here, you'll see that armor, leadership, speed remain the same. Melee attack and defense are very close, but this one is obviously an armor-piercing and anti-large variant that also maintains the very low charge bonus. Now, as far as abilities, this unit has the charge defense against large, meaning if it is charged while braced against a large unit, it's going to negate that. Formation attack is here. They can also hide in a forest. And further, they're going to have charge reflection, meaning whenever they're braced, they're not just going to negate that charge bonus of the large foes that come in, but this should apply to anything. When it charges them, they're going to reflect it back. So you do not want to be charging a braced unit of Jade Warriors with Halberds. They also have the same two abilities there on the end, the defensive ability, and then their battle harmony is also yang, being a melee unit, meaning they should be protecting nearby missile units. And when Jade Warriors graduate, they turn into Celestial Dragon Guard. This is going to be a very tanky, elite, armor-piercing, anti-large unit. It's going to have higher armor, even better leadership, same slow speed, but improved melee attack and very solid weapon strength. But they're still going to suffer from a low charge bonus because, as with the other infantry units, the Celestial Dragon Guard is very much a defensive unit, meant to be braced and protecting Cathay's missile units. Now, as far as abilities, it's got expert charge defense, it's going to have formation attack, it can hide in the forest, it's also got charge reflection, and like the other units of its type, it is going to be a Yang harmony, meaning that it needs to be protecting or in the presence of Yin units. The whole idea of this, of course, being that they're trying to get the player to diversify their army, to use that harmony of Yin and Yang, and give this faction a unique flavor. All in all, from an infantry standpoint, Cathay is going to be very defensive, and they do have some tanky units to help in that defense, and I'm going to be very curious to see what the Peasant Long Spearmen look like as well, because Cathay could be very good at protecting its missiles. And speaking of missiles, let's get on to the first missile unit that we're going to see in this roster video, which is Peasant Archers. They are, of course, very low armor, low leadership, not particularly fast, but faster than the infantry, terrible melee stats, but they're going to have a pretty good amount of ammunition and decent range at 140, but their missile strength is going to be quite low. However, as you'll see here in a moment as we go through the abilities, which is Hide in Forest, they are also expendable, meaning that you can basically throw these units away, and I guess apparently in Cathayan society, it's okay to just throw away some Peasant Archers. Poor expendable units, they just always take the shaft here. But we're going to get to a new ability here, which is the Harmony of Yin. So we talked about the Yang units who gain leadership and melee defense. Yin units are going to gain reload skill, up to 24 reload skill. And remember that this activates when they are within a 35-meter presence of a Yang unit. So for a player using Yin and Yang, you can take a unit like Peasant Archers and make them considerably stronger by balancing that Yin and Yang. Now, if you're ready to graduate to something a little harder hitting, something with a little more armor, well, the next step up is going to be our Jade Warriors with crossbows, and they also have shields. This unit's going to be very much akin to something like Quarrelers from the Dwarves. They have very good range, pretty good missile strength, and I think the important thing to remember here is that these cats have that Harmony of Yin, and when they're in the presence of a Yang unit, they're going to gain considerable reload, which means that they're going to be considerably stronger. They also have the defensive ability that we saw on the other Jade Warriors, which means that they are going to be a lot tougher when charged. So I'll let them pop that up here, and you can see it again. They can hide in a forest, of course, as most units can. But again, the longer they're standing still, the more charge resistant these units are. So they won't be as easy for light cavalry to wipe out, meaning that this unit has a little more staying power. And then mix that with the Yin and Yang, and you've got a unit that is considerably tankier and is going to dish out a lot more damage. Now let's say that you need some gunpowder in your life. Well, Cathay is not going to disappoint, and let's move on to our first gun unit, which is the Crane Gunners. These are pretty low armor, but with a good shield. These are going to be similar to, say, Warplock Jezzails in terms of range and the type of damage they do. They are a sniper unit with the shield breaker damage. They can hide in a forest, and they also have Yin, which again, in the presence of a Yang unit, means that they're going to do more damage. Again, I imagine this unit being used within that defensive formation to pick off enemy lords, valuable cavalry, anything that's heavily armored or shielded. This unit is going to considerably weaken it and make it a lot easier for Peasant Archers or Jade Warrior crossbowmen to do their damage. So it almost feels like a nice support unit within a support unit, or a niche unit for picking off some of the most valuable targets. We can imagine that this unit probably cost more considering the type of damage it's going to do, but nonetheless a very interesting addition to the roster. And speaking of roster, let's move along to our next unit. This is going to be our first artillery unit, which is the Fire Rain Rocket. Now this is going to be a long range, you can see it 360, high damage unit. It does not appear to be particularly armor piercing, however we don't get a vision on just how much of the missile strength is armor piercing. We can probably assume that this unit will be similar to, say, a Hellstorm rocket battery for the Empire, though I do believe the Hellstorm rocket battery does do armor-piercing damage. So again, this one's going to be one that I need to see in action, but it is a pretty high damage, and we will assume it probably is also going to affect an area, you know what I mean? Like, it won't be a pinpoint artillery piece. It does have Siege Attacker, so it can attack walls and towers, and then again has the Battle Harmony of Yin. No surprise there, as it is a missile unit. So, first interesting entry into the artillery segment of the Cathay roster, but hey, there's more. Now, if you're interested in something that is going to be a little more accurate, a little more pinpoint, you're going to move on from the Fire Rain Rocket, which again is going to be good against, say, like skirmishers or blobbed infantry, to the Grand Cannon. The Grand Cannon has additional range. Its missile strength is lower, but obviously has a considerable AP amount because we see that icon there. It is, again, a siege attacker, meaning it can attack walls and towers. It is, of course, going to be Harmony of Yin, so when protected by Yang units, it will increase its reload skill and leadership. I can imagine the Grand Cannon being used in a similar way to a Dwarf Cannon and the Empire Cannon, meaning that they will be good at picking at cavalry, large targets, single entity lords, and other high-value targets that have a relatively good-sized hitbox. Though, like those other cannons we see, it can occasionally still be used well against infantry. We can probably expect no different from the Grand Cannon. We're going to get our first look at the Terracotta Sentinel here, which is going to be a really cool single-entity monster unit from Grand Cathay. I thought this unit, because of it holding a giant halberd, would be anti-large. It is not, but it is armor-piercing. It deals magical attack and a very high attack value. Relatively low defense, but this is a Yang unit, meaning its defense can be buffed by being around missile units that it's protecting or just other Yin units like artillery. It has very high armor, very good leadership, pretty decent speed at 48. I mean, it's not too bad. It is capable of being a siege attacker. It is going to have fear, which is going to drop enemy leadership. It's going to have terror, which can cause a terror rout when enemy leadership drops low enough. It is unbreakable, so you're not going to be able to get this one off the field unless you kill it. It can take wounds because it is a single entity, and this is a new system for Warhammer 3. And again, as mentioned, it is a Harmony of Yang. So it's going to be a very powerful single entity monster to help Cathay protect those missile units. And there are a lot of missile units to protect. Now, floating above the Terracotta Sentinel, we are going to find one of those cool balloons here. This is the Sky Junk. This is going to be a long-range artillery platform that is always flying. It cannot land. And we'll see that when we get down to the abilities here. It's got basically the same missile strength that we saw from the rockets. It also has bombs, much like a gyrocopter, as a bound ability that you can see here being demonstrated, so up to 3 uses. However, this is a very, very slow-moving unit, so don't expect this thing to get around the battlefield quickly. It's, like I said, it can't be landed. It's always flying. It does have flaming ammunition, so should be good against anything that regenerates. And of course, it helps with spotting amongst other units, which can be very helpful. It does take wounds because it is a single entity, and because it is a missile unit, it is in the Harmony of Yin. So an interesting sky artillery to support your army. Now, if you liked the Crane Gunners, get ready for the Sky Lantern, which is basically the flying version of the Crane Gunners. It's going to do a little less damage because there's not as many models up here. It's got a lot of ammunition, and it is a slow-moving platform, but this thing is going to be able to really pick at key enemy units, and it can fire whilst moving. Again, it's not moving anywhere fast, but they can continue to fire while moving. It's going to be a very interesting unit to be able to kind of float above the battlefield and be able to put damage where it's most needed on very valuable units. Also has Eye of the Dragon, so it's going to help with spotting. It can also take wounds because this thing is a single entity, and of course, again, with all of these missile units, it is a Harmony of Yin, so keep it close to Yang units in order to improve its capabilities. So you can imagine this unit will cause a lot of damage when it's floating above a couple of Yang units, like the Jade Warriors with Halberds. Now, these floating artillery units are great support, but we're going to move on to another support unit. This one is the Alchemist, so this is going to be a wizard, essentially, for the Cathay armies, but also has some interesting bound abilities that you're going to be able to take a look at. This is not a melee character. They're not going to be great in melee. This is going to be something akin to what you see with most wizards. They're not going to hold up well in a prolonged melee fight, but are instead intended to be a support unit. Now, the first ability here is the Alchemist Elixir of Iron Skin, which gives the Alchemist herself higher armor. The next elixir is focused on melee attack. Now, this one has a 100-meter range. It looks like it could be cast onto another unit. And then the third one is Enhanced Metallurgy, which is going to help with weapon damage. Now, beyond the elixirs, we're going to see some lore of metal here. We're going to have Searing Doom, Plague of Rust, all the other spells that you would come to expect from the lore of metal, though I'm assuming there could be small tweaks to these based on the fact that they've had to look at balancing for Game 3. So again, maybe some things different. I haven't looked through each one of these to see whether or not that is the case. You may have to look at it yourself. But Lore of Metal, a pretty powerful lore, and then combine it with those elixirs, the Alchemist is going to be a very, very nice support unit. It does have the Encourage, Hide, and Forest abilities. So again, like any leadership unit, going to help out the units around it. It has Mastery of Elemental Winds, which when you have more than one character with this on the map, it's going to increase the power of spells cast. That's going to be really interesting to see and see how that plays out. Wounds, like any single entity, so over time as this unit loses HP, it's going to start fighting not as well. metal shifting here, which is the ability from previous games, and then some missile resistance at 15% would be nice to help protect this unit. And then, of course, the player's going to mouse over these abilities so you all can see these one more time here to get a look at those elixirs. So the Alchemist shaping up to be a very interesting support unit and wizard add for Cathay. And last but most assuredly not least is Meow Ying, the Storm Dragons. This is one of the legendary lords for Grand Cathay and an exciting character, be certain. Now, this is her in her human form here. You can see decent armor, really good leadership, pretty solid speed, really good melee attack and defense, actually. Almost not quite duelist levels, but good. Charge bonus, good weapon strength, nothing AP, magical attack. She's going to be pretty good in melee, even in this form. Now let's take a look at abilities. We start off with Wrath of Storm here. She's going to increase the melee attack of units within a certain radius. She's also got Transformation of the Dragon, which transforms her into a dragon. You'll get to see that here at the end. And then she's going to have Earthblood. So this is a Lore of Life spell that we're familiar with that can heal units in a radius. She's going to have Storm of Shadows here, which is a new Lore of Yin spell. She's going to decrease speed in an area. Flesh to Stone, which of course can give physical resistance to nearby a unit. And then we're going to have Missile Mirror, which is a new spell, again, Lore of Yin, which will reflect the projectiles back towards whatever firing. So very interesting ability to see there for Meow Ying. And she's got a lot more than that too. Regrowth, which is an excellent healing spell that we have seen in previous games. It can bring back a lot of hit points. Very useful for single entities. We've got Talons of the Night, another Lore of Yin spell here, which is a vortex. So should be able to cause damage to blobs. She is a siege attacker. Could be useful in sieges for helping to break through gates. And then she does encourage. I mean, who wouldn't be encouraged by Meow Ying? I mean, if I had a Storm Dragon in my army, I'd be pretty happy about it. She's able to hide in a forest like basically every other unit. I'm assuming that changes when she turns into a giant flying dragon. Then she's also got Mastery of the Eternal Wind. So again, when she's on the battlefield at the same time as other magic units, it's going to make all the spells more powerful. I really like all this synergy that we get. She does take wounds because she is a single entity. No surprise there. Next up is an interesting Hex, which is Disdain of the Dragon, which is a constant -8 melee attack within a 35-meter radius for any unit that is not a lord or a hero. So nice debuff. She's got Life Bloom, which is going to give small amounts of healing while she's casting. We've seen this one in past games. Then we're also going to see another ability here, which is Power of Yin. So this is going to take away armor and speed for anything within a 55-meter range for, a certain time while she's casting. We've got Arcane Conduit, which is going to boost recharge rate for the winds. Very helpful. And then there's 15% missile resistance. Very nice to have when you're a single entity and you don't like being shot in the face with guns. And she has a massive spell resistance here at 25%. So that's going to make it a lot more difficult to deal with her with stuff, say like Spirit Leech or other direct damage spells, because she can heal and she resists it. Now we're going to see her transformation ability as the player recording pushes the start button and then comes down and uses the transformation, which is very similar to what we saw with Zarkon, though this is going to be a much more grand transformation, as Meow Ying does turn into the Storm Dragon. I'll let you all catch the animation and then the stats. Now, when she transfers into the Storm Dragon, her melee stats are going to go up significantly. So really what it is a play on is, as needed, you make that transformation. It changes, her size and the type of character that she is, but it's going to give you a massive increase in terms of your melee capability. So let's check that out here. They're going to go click the transformation button. They had to wait for a cooldown, so you can't just do this the instant that a battle starts, apparently. And we're going to see that flip over here. It has a countdown, and then here is the transformation animation. So again, much like Zarkon, and then here she comes out as the Storm Dragon, which, might I add, is probably one of the coolest looking single entities that we've seen in the Warhammer series so far. Really good armor, fantastic leadership, quick speed, good attack, good melee defense, very high weapon damage with armor piercing, and a very solid charge bonus. Pretty much all of the abilities stay the same. Like I said, you can imagine that hide in forest and other things are going to go away, but wow, what a finish to the Cathay roster. Really interesting stuff here, and again, actually some meat that we can finally take something away from, which is why I am covering this. I feel like we've learned a lot about how Cathay is going to play. They're going to be very defensive, which you could kind of assume in their missiles, but their strengths really rely on how well the player couples their units together with the yin and the yang, with the eternal mastery of the heavens, where magic spells are increased. So seems like everything with the Cathay is set up around this whole lore idea of yin and yang and finding that balance and using each unit's strengths to help make those around them stronger. So I do think Cathay is going to play a lot like, say, Dwarves, or maybe even Skaven, in the sense that they try and protect missile units. However, we're going to see a lot more tankiness out of the Cathay than we do from, say, the Skaven. Maybe less armor than we do at times for the Dwarves, but they also have considerably more anti-large. The Dwarves seem to struggle in that regard, but some very interesting buffs and bonuses that go into it as well. So I think we get a pretty good feel for how Cathay is going to play out on the battlefield. So if you're the type of player that loves using range damage and likes playing a little bit more defensively and tries to put your opponent on the run with your missile power, then I think Cathay is going to be a faction you want to keep a close eye on. Hope y'all enjoyed this. If you did, make sure and hit that like button and make sure you subscribe, because I'm going to have more content soon. And I can't wait to see you then. HeirofCarthage signing out for now.